This time on KEI Fabrication. Hey folks, welcome back. As you can see, the Mazda's up on the lift. I got myself a little bit of jam. I was on my way to work this morning. The alternator died and I ended up having to call my wife to bring the battery jump box. Hey folks, welcome back. As you can see, the Mazda's up on the lift. I got myself a little bit of jam. I was on my way to work this morning. The alternator died and I ended up having to call my wife to bring the battery jump box so I could drive the thing home. I drove it home on the jump box because the alternator went and drained the battery. Probably not the best time to make our big announcement, but the whole purpose of my next video was to be that we're gonna have a pretty spectacular goal set for this truck, and that is my son and I are gonna take this truck to Drag Week 2019 for the 5-day endurance drag racing event that Hot Rod puts on. Which means we're going to be driving from Rhode Island to Virginia and then competing in the 1,000-mile road trip and the 5 tracks associated with it. Breaking down as a daily driver is not a real good warm fuzzy feeling to embark on probably what's going to equate to about a 2,500-mile journey and then race it in between. And furthermore, the alternator used to be positioned right under the, sorry the light's in the way from the shop, but there's the power steering pump, here's the harmonic balancer. Alternator was positioned here on a custom bracket I made. It was all done while the motor was out on the stand. Some of you saw it running on the stand. The serpentine belt routing was all complete, and I put the motor in with the alternator bolted to it. And I did what I swore I would never do and always swore at the engineers of the automotive manufacturers, that I would never engineer something that would be difficult to take apart. Well, as it turns out, there's no way to get the alternator out without either stripping the radiator or the drive accessories. And I found that I have to drop the center link in order to get the alternator out. So that's what I'm in the middle of doing. Hey folks, you can see I thought I was going to be smart and I ordered the 130 amp alternator to replace the 105 amp because power demands are pretty high. Got a really aggressive fuel pump in there now, and then the fuel injection computers and all of that. So anyway, I was trying to add some capacity, some reserve capacity or increase capacity compared to what I had. I'm a little frightened here because you saw how difficult it was to get this out. I don't even know if this will go in. I took some measurements. It looks massive. It is slightly larger in diameter, but this you can see kind of tapers off and rolls out. This is smaller diameter and this is straighter. The outside diameter of the case is just like a 1/4 inch larger. I hope I have enough room between the steering box and this, and plus a little deflection. And I have no idea if this is going to go back in where I had to undo the center link to get this one out. So I'm going to try. I won't be able to video it because I only have one pair of hands here, and I got to try to be real careful because I don't want to ding this up or dirty it up in case I have to go and exchange it. So we'll see what happens. So while I've got this out, I figured I'd show you the alternator bracket. You could almost see it in the videos when the engine was running on the stand, but I chose to have the alternator belt go around the sheave and over the top of this to get more engagement around the pulley, the way the belt travels. And once I get it all together, I think I can take, or you can see it on the opening video. There's a picture of the motor running on the stand. You can see the belt routing. So this one picks up a third location going through the water pump. There's a spacer that goes right here between this and the water pump. This one threads into the block, and this one threads into the block, and there's a actually, I'm sorry, this one threads into the block. This is the one that you have to drill and tap if it wasn't already from the factory. And then this one is a through bolt with a nut on the back side, and there's spacers back here to space it off of the block accordingly. So just something, when the engine was out on the stand, I was able to kind of engineer and incorporate the idler pulley at the same time. So here we go. Alright folks, I got it in there. I have a 1/4 of an inch clearance between the steering box and that 130 amp alternator. It was a struggle to get that in there. I had to cut this bracket down. This held a splash shield that went under here. Had a fastener here. I had to cut off the encapsulated nut that was there. I had to take both motor mount bolts out. I had to put my transmission jack under here with a block of wood. Raise it up, move the motor over so I could get the alternator through this space and in front of the engine. Once I got it in front of the engine, there's plenty of room to get in there. I can put my ratchet in, I can manipulate everything. This is definitely something I have to address. If this alternator ever went bad on the side of the road during drag week, and I had to go through the hassle that I just went through, man, we'd be stranded for hours. I still have the center link disconnected. I'm going to hook it up completely. I'm going to put the belt on. I got to make sure this alternator works. Make sure my charging issue is resolved. Then I'll come back and put this all back together. So unfortunately, still not out of the woods yet. I'm going to have to put some miles on it. These motor mounts are pretty rigid. I'm pretty sure that alternator isn't going to bang off the steering box. It is really close. If it ends up being a problem, I'm going to end up having to eat this alternator probably and buy the 105 amp, but I really would like to get this 130 amp to work. Verdict's still out. Let's see how we make out. Alright folks, this thing is just a super big struggle. I should have just returned this alternator. I got the 105 amp. I get it all in there, I get it bolted up, I go to hook up the indicator light connection, and there's no room between the steering box to get it in there. So what I'm doing now, the only tool I have to get this off without throwing a bunch of metal into the new alternator is a hacksaw. So this is a little tiny cast tab. Let's see if I can get in there. That sticks out from the steering box. I think if I cut that off, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't flatten against, doesn't register or anything. I think I can cut it off, and I think the electrical connection will fit. And once it's in there, there'll be plenty of clearance between the steering box and the electrical connector. That won't be the issue. You can see I've got a 1/4 of an inch clearance between the box and the housing here. Again, I think the motor mounts are pretty rigid. It shouldn't smack into it. Again, if it does, I'm just going to have to eat this alternator and put a 105 back in there and go through this whole process again. So let's see how this, I'm going to put the belt on next after I get the connector on, start it up, make sure my voltage is correct. So the thing is up way over 14 volts. The battery was down to like 11.5. So the alternator is charging. I think that was the solution to the problem. I really can't complain. The alternator that was in it came out of the junkyard, as you saw, and you know, it had 180,000 on it. I put another 9,000 miles on it. So here's the deal. That electrical connector is back in. I'm trying to get you the closeness of it. I actually rev the motor up pretty good. It doesn't shake at all. It's pretty solid. So was it worth it with the struggle? I have no idea. If it ever goes bad on the road, I'm never going to be able to change it quickly anyway, and I'm certainly going to need another pair of hands. Again, I had to take the motor mount bolts out, jack the motor up, move the motor to one side to get the alternator in between the steering box and the block, get the alternator out in front of the block where it bolts on, and then after that everything was good. So it fits. Man, what a struggle. I'm not happy. If it ever happens again, like I said, especially on the side of the road at night, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. Alright folks, we're back in the shop today. It's a couple days after I did the alternator, and if you listen, I'm pretty sure that squeaking noise is coming out of the idler pulley down low right next to the alternator. It kind of seems where the noise is propagating from. If you move over from one side to the engine to the other, the noise definitely intensifies when you come over here. So I grabbed a new idler from AutoZone, and we're going to throw it in there and see if it solves the issue. Well folks, I changed out that idler pulley, which is way down there. We're looking at the back side of it, and the noise is gone. So when I pulled the pulley out, the idler out, I mean, this thing spins nice and free. There's no grinding. You can't hear anything when you hold it up to your ear and spin it. There's no rough spots in it. I really didn't think that this was the issue, and I was thinking I was going to have to chase it around with either a bad water pump or the other tensioner, the tensioner pulley. But I guess this was actually creating an issue. So I'm thankful that the noise has gone away. I will keep this one for a spare because I haven't self-destructed yet. But oh well. At least the problem's solved. Next time on KEI Fabrication.